Hello friends, I'm Chromatic Sauce and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're gonna watch me draw. Now for this drawing I wanted to start from top to bottom, this way my hands didn't smear any of my drawing. So that means the first thing was the clouds, which was pretty easy, just layering blues and grays and then shading over it with white to help blend it together and lighten it up a little bit. I was just going back and forth adding a little bit more depth until it matched the photo to my liking. Then I wanted to get started on the pole. I wanted to make sure my pole looked pretty straight on the side. If I left the pole to the end, I wasn't sure if I would have mistakenly drawn in it from the sides of my other parts of the background. So that's why I just wanted to get that straight line in there before I messed it up. That's when I got started on the flag. Now for the shadows in the whites of the flag, I decided to go with this nice cool grayish blue. I thought it would really make the reds pop out, and I just thought that this flag looked like it had some blue shadows in it, and then I went over the whole whites with white. Then for the red, I didn't want to just use a really dark red. I wanted to make sure the stripes still looked pretty bright, so that's why I went with black to do some light shading where the dark parts of the red were. And then after that I went over those dark parts with a dark red to get those shadows really in there and really dark red, and it blended with the black beautifully for me. For the highlights of the red, I went with a nice orange color. By using the orange, I was able to ensure that the highlights of the red would be bright without getting too pink, because if I used white mixed with red, obviously that would turn pink. So by using orange and then simply overlaying a slightly darker, more vibrant red on top of the orange, I was able to make it a true red for me. The hardest part of this flag was definitely where the stars were. It was hard to make sure I didn't accidentally draw over them, and I did draw over a couple that I had to scratch away and erase away. But it wasn't too hard. That's why I went over all the stars with white first. That way if I had to erase or scratch any mistaken marks, it wasn't as hard as it would have been if I didn't have those whites down. Once I felt like I was done getting all the colors right in the flag and I got my highlights with white on that blue, that's when I went in with a black colored pencil to finish off my shading, and that black really helped all the shadows come together on the flag, and I really like how that flag turned out. The next part was the mountain. I decided that the background didn't need a lot of heavy colored penciled work, so I figured it would be easier to start out with a nice gray base here. So I went in with a marker to give a nice mid-tone to build off of. Putting that gray down first really helped me make sure there wouldn't be any whites peeking through. So while I was able to keep some highlights in the mountains, I didn't have to burnish the whole paper to make sure it was dark. So that's why I went with the marker as a background. Now the mountains were a bit of a challenge. Once I got that base down, I knew I had a good canvas to work on. I knew it wouldn't show a lot of white through, which is what I was looking for. So I layered blacks, blues. Since we know atmospheric perspective is still a thing, it's going to have a nice haze of blue on it. So I layered that with some greens and purples. This mountain isn't just one color, there's many different colors, and I was trying my best to bring out all of them while not making it too flat. And as I was going down, I didn't want to lose my lines for these branches on the side, so I decided to just mark them out in black with a nice sharp pencil. The next layer in the background down was what looks like a field and some buildings. I just did my best emulating that. I tried to match the colors the best I could. I used a nice dark gray to start outlining my shapes in the background, and then I used that structure to start layering from the darkest color I saw, and I slowly built in more and more color from that. Now, I'm not that used to doing backgrounds, so it was pretty difficult. I just went with warm grays and green colors, and I tried to just emulate the colors I saw. I tried to also use some of the same colors that I used earlier and some of the same colors that I was going to use later in the drawing. The same thing for the other side. I just went with the darkest part first. I layered in a really dark gray to get my outlines. I layered in white to make sure the highlighted areas stayed lighter. I went in with slightly darker and darker grays and greens and browns to help build up the color between those parts. It was a slow process. It was new for me. All you can do is try, and that's what I did. I just slowly layered it up until the colors were starting to look right to me. Then once I got down to the section with the river, I used black first to do the outer perimeter of it. Then I used black to do a little bit of general shading. All that before I chose the green that I used in the previous section of the background. I went over all of it with that green drawing before I took the white and I burnished on top of that to blend everything together. And then for those branches on the sides, I just took a nice sharp white color pencil. I did a highlight on top of all the black lines I made on both sides of the drawing. Once I got to the bottom of the drawing, I wasn't quite sure how to shade the ground. I don't really draw grounds, especially dirt. It's dusty. How do you draw something that looks dry and powdery? I'm not quite sure. So that's why I decided not to burnish. I decided to just go with the pencil texture on the paper. I started with my black shading first. I wanted to make sure my shadows were going to be in the right spot. So I went through the whole area around the dog with black, and I shaded everything with black first before I started going in with more colored pencil color and deepening things up. It was a pretty easy process to just layer colors of browns, all the while I was thinking this dog is a brown dog too, so I wanted to keep the tones a little bit different. I used slightly different browns for the ground than I did for the dog itself. I did go over the rocks in the background with a more gray tone, and I went over the foreground with a nice yellow ochre tone. That way when I started in on the dog, it would be just a shade off, so that way the dog would be a slightly different tone than the rest of the browns. Then when I started on the dog, I didn't want to burnish on this. A lot of times when I draw animals, I will press kind of hard on the paper because I want it to be really substantial and I want the colors to be bold. As I started on Mocha, once again I went in with black. I don't normally start shading with black. A lot of times the black can dirty the color that you're putting on top of it, but for this it was such a small area, I wasn't planning on pressing very hard with my colored pencils, so I wasn't too concerned about it blending with them and making things look dirty. So I just wanted to make sure I had all my shadows in the right places. So for this drawing, I started with the black, and then I chose gradually lighter and lighter browns to help me add depth to the fur and to help me slowly build up. Since this is a pretty small drawing, this is only 8 by 11, and that means that the dog's face is only maybe an inch and a half tall. So I didn't want to have too much pencil in there. I wanted to make sure the face still looked bright, because if you see in the photo, there's a lot of sun on this dog's face, but I also didn't want to make it too dark and too muddy. I didn't want to add too much colored pencil because it's very easy to add too much colored pencil, especially in a small area. I just added layer after layer of going lighter and lighter with my browns to add the detail, and by the end of the drawing, I did do a little bit of a layer of a more orange brown to once again help me make the dog look like a different tone than the ground. Once I was done drawing the dog, I did go over it with a slightly orange color. I felt like the orange color really helped it pop as separate from the yellow background and from the slightly grayer background of those rocks. So I just wanted to make sure the browns were slightly different tones on that. Let me know, what did you think of this drawing? Let me know what sort of drawings you'd like to see next. If you'd like, I can draw your pet or a friend's. They make great gifts, everyone. Come on, come on. Email is in the description. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. You can follow me on Instagram @ChromaticSauce. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.